probably started using when I was about 22, and it became more of a problem later, but it was started off as recreational at around that age. I think I stopped briefly in the year 2000. I think I was about 25-ish, and look, it was only briefly, and it was based on some court pressure, some legal pressure. Once that court pressure was off and I had that so-called green light, that cycle continued and just progressed and just got worse. Yeah. So the last time I used ice was the 24th of December 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's 11 years ago?
Yeah, just over 11 years ago, yeah.
So there's something very significant about that day?
Yes. So in the year 2000, I started going to 12-step recovery, and that was my introduction really to recovery. And then I did have a series of relapses, but then in 2005, 5 years later, I had found the trapdoor in my rock bottom, and then decided that it was time and it was serious enough that I decided to do something about it, and 12-step fellowship was a big part of that. It was all about me not being able to find a solution for feelings that I was having. Having any kind of drug in my system, especially ice, that was my solution. And I was able to manage things. I was able to get up, I was able to interact, I was able to have some form of relationships with people. It wasn't an ideal relationship, but it was some form of relationship, and I was able to somewhat participate. But without it, I wouldn't have been able to, and I didn't know that there was any other way. I was so connected in with that life and everything that I needed to do in order to get ice. It was this whole cycle on a daily basis that I just couldn't get past. I think that shame and remorse, I remember specifically really clearly before I became homeless at Mum's place, that I was in the middle of the night. I think I woke up, or I was having trouble getting to sleep. I remember that crawling commando style through my mum's room, you know, just to get something of value, you know, and everything about me, everything at that time was saying, don't do this. But I couldn't stop myself, and at the time it was like I was a passenger, you know, I was just along for the ride. And what happened from there was that I knew that I was going to get caught, but it didn't stop me. And remorse just kept me away from the people who loved me the most, which is really strange because I love my family. And there was this driving force, which was ice, which was keeping me away doing these horrible things. And I've actually worked through that stuff. I don't have any shame around that anymore. I accept that as who I was and what the drugs did to me. But today I think, that that's a really valuable memory to hold on to. Because if I didn't have that, I think that it would be a lot easier for me to slide back into that addiction again. I think one of the relapses that stands out the most would have been the very last time that I used, and that was in and around having gotten this so-called green light from the magistrate. And you know, I I'd celebrated with a relapse, which was what I did. And this particular relapse was quite serious because I was involved in a whole lot of family dynamics that was really not so healthy. And it turned out that I was homeless after this particular relapse. I had no money for food, and I got caught. I got caught in some sort of shoplifting thing where a suspended sentence was actioned, and I was facing some serious time. I wasn't welcome back in the family home. My behaviour was way too out of control. There was a lot of lies, deceit, and this was all around just getting money for drugs. So I was what you would call an Academy Award-winning performer when it came to spinning a yarn to my family, and it got to the point where I was so bad at finding resources to get drugs that I basically had to con my family, and it was really sad. And it got to the point where they had had enough, and it was time for them to put a stop to it, and that's why this specific relapse was the one that stands out the most, because that's when my last lifeline had been taken away from me. I had actually had no one else. It was only my family who stood by me the whole way through, and then they decided to pull the pin, and I think that was when I decided that it was time to really focus on doing something about my ice use. I was facing jail. You know, that scared me. Homelessness didn't so much scare me. Not having the support of my family and going to jail, both of those together, I think, was one of the more serious things that happened for me. And I was able to consider all that stuff whilst I was on ice, you know, and it scared me. And then I remember a little bit further down the track when I'd actually accessed detox, that was quite an important value for me, having family by my side and not being in jail. My dealer was going off on Christmas holidays and told me that the 24th was when he was available, and I had gotten up late that day and called his phone, and it was off. And the panic sunk in, and I didn't know what to do. And about an hour later, I got a phone call from a detox asking me if I wanted to take this bed that I'd applied for maybe about 3 weeks previous. And it just seemed like the right thing to do, you know. That afternoon, I'd actually packed a bag and went into this particular detox, and yeah, my first day clean was Christmas Day 2005. I had something in my back pocket when I went into detox that was really valuable, that no one else in detox had, and that was knowledge of 12-step recovery. And I remember that, and I thought that of all the people that are here, I've got a really good chance of actually doing something about this. And I knew that I wasn't just going to detox to get some time away from my last drug, that I actually had a plan after I'd left detox. And for the first time in detox, because I'd done 8 previous detoxes, 10 days each, this particular time I actually had some hope for when I left detox, instead of the belief that I was actually going to leave that detox and use. So I think that was the difference, that I actually had a little bit of hope. I've always had this plan of, this idea of what my life was going to be like. And when I picked up drugs, everything was derailed from there. And I think that one of the more important points of me actually wanting to get clean and stay clean was that because I had the willingness to do something, there were some professionals around that were willing to help me. For the first time ever, I saw that if I actually put my hand up and said that I had a problem, and then I didn't know what to do, and I'm open to get some help, is exactly when the help came. I was pretty lucky because I knew some people who were financial counsellors, and I knew some people who were also working in AOD, and they were really willing to point me in the right direction. Some of those directions were not just detox, but it was suggested that maybe I go to rehab, you know, and that happened, and I went to rehab in a different state. And then from there I was pointed in the direction of a supported accommodation. I was guided by all these people who I had complete and utter trust and faith in, because they'd shown me that that there was another way to move forward, and as long as I kept putting my hand up for help, the help was there. I diverted from my path a little bit, and then seeing that diversion from that path, and then relapsing again. I think seeing that relapse and then putting my hand up for help and then going back around again, I think I was able to do review and even try and do something different the next time around, because I was so willing, but I just didn't have any of the insight in what I needed to do. I think that was the most beneficial, the fact that I fell over and I picked myself back up again, because I actually saw that I could do that by myself. Yeah. I saw people who had reached out for help immediately after they had obtained higher education or a job they'd wanted, and I thought that was incredible, and I did that immediately, and I kind of felt that I'd not only entered uncharted territory where I was doing something way beyond my wildest dreams, but I had a support system and a plan where I was able to get that support around reaching out for help, so that self-sabotage didn't come in and take me back to that original cycle of, you know, failure. I think a big part is a stable home life. Having routine, I think, has been huge. But I think keeping busy is one of my biggest, I think one of the most important parts of that. It's also one of my downfalls as well, because along with being busy with a lot of stuff, whether it be work or whether it be with my passion, other things I sacrifice, like relationships with my son, you know, and with my girlfriend and with my family. And then if I go too far in the other direction and spend time with my family, my son and my girlfriend, I feel like I'm not feeding my soul and having fun with motorcycles. So it's a fine balance. I couldn't see too far into the future, you know. I didn't really have any great ideas, except I knew that using a drug was just not going to be helpful. You know, I just knew that. It's almost like my brain just seized and stopped working, but I knew that it was going to get better, you know, that I just had to kind of just sit within that fog and just kind of let it clear all by itself. And people assured me around me, especially people in 12-step programs, that if I hung around and did what they did, that the fog would clear. I think some of the big decisions that I had to make really when that fog was around was, should I have a shower in the morning or should I have a shower in the afternoon? I was virtually incapable of doing any kind of work. I wasn't employable. And I don't know whether or not I was considered trustworthy at the time. I certainly didn't feel trustworthy. Being in early stages of recovery, without the drugs and spending most of my time not using drugs and thinking about not using drugs, I was exhausted. Probably about a year and a half after I'd stopped using, that I started to feel I started to care for my appearance, because people in my life wanted to spend time with me, and I felt that the relationships that I had built in that year and a half started to mean something to me. Some relationships that I had with some people who were in recovery, 12-step recovery, who were really helpful in guiding me through the fog, and those relationships meant more to me than any drug or any relationship with any drug dealer. I felt that now I was able to look outside of myself. All of the relapses happened in and around this legal pressure that I experienced after I first found 12-step recovery. The relapses, I didn't even know what a relapse was until the year 2000, and I think that without other people I wouldn't be in recovery. I couldn't do this by myself, largely to do with 12-step fellowships. Other people show me what I need to do, and other people show me what I shouldn't be doing. Yeah, so I find it really helpful. I find both sides of the coin inspirational. What keeps me going is finding not more success, but just staying where I feel happy. And I think finding myself a little bit of a rhythm in my job, in my personal life, my social life, and I guess I couldn't have done any of that if I didn't find fun. You know, I needed to find something that made me smile in recovery. Otherwise, I was absolutely going to use, and I found that, and I'm so grateful that I found that. But in order for me to maintain that, I need to absolutely stay positive. Fun is having relationships with people who I enjoy being with. Fun is obviously I love working with motorcycles. I love riding motorcycles, and just being part of another community who don't use drugs, or maybe there are drugs there, but I enjoy being part of another community, you know, and I don't need to always be around people who are recovering from drug addiction. You know, for me, it's I kind of feel like now I'm living the life I've always wanted to live, that I didn't even have any glimpse of when I had the fog surrounding me. And today I'm just really grateful that I'm able to live that life, and that it's evolved to something that I couldn't have imagined. I work with a government-funded not-for-profit organisation in Melbourne. It's a supported accommodation with community living. I was working in my incredible dream job with motorcycles, and I started losing touch with my passion. I didn't feel like riding motorcycles or playing with motorcycles on the weekend or after hours, because I was doing it all day. I felt really stuck, almost like I'd plateaued in my so-called dream job. Being someone with ADHD, study wasn't my strong point. But through recovery, I have found some really helpful ways to manage my ADHD without medication. And through that, I was a little bit excited about working or studying in that field. So I embarked on a diploma of case management with a school in Melbourne. And then through that, I started a diploma of AOD and mental health. and I was given an opportunity to sit in on an interview with this particular place that I work at now, and I was offered the job, and I was really scared, and I knew that I had to make a decision. It was either go forward and take a risk, and I asked a lot of people a lot of questions, and I got to the point where it was one of those things that just kind of felt the right thing to do, and that was almost 7 years ago that I took this job here, and I have found my passion for motorcycles again, which is incredible. So I'm able to be Mr. Fix-It, and that's in my personal time, and I'm able to be Evan Helper in my work time. So I feel like I've got really both sides of the fence covered, and it really is difficult to try and find the balance between the two. I feel my lived experience is paramount to do this job, especially within this organisation, because I don't just have some training to help with the work that I do here, but I think I've got some credibility because I've got that lived experience, because I'm asked, you know, what do you know, or how would you know, and I can quite confidently say, you know, I actually do know. And it's really lovely to see people come into this service a little bit broken like I was, and to leave this service being able to have eye contact with people and having an idea of where their passion lies and looking towards getting some success in their life. One of the biggest challenges that I found earlier on was that having one hat for my own personal recovery and having my professional hat, and when to take that off and put that on, and to really kind of do that seamlessly, almost as if I'm having a general conversation one-on-one, you know, with someone, and, you know, take that professional hat off and just be really kind of supportive. I've also found it difficult for me because when I do my own recovery, and that could be in 12-step recovery, sometimes I might actually see a client at these particular meetings. So having boundaries and knowing when to put the hat on of the worker and to take that hat off, I think, is my biggest challenge. Yeah. But I think in the 7 years of working here, it's gotten easier. Yeah. It was really difficult for me to see a client come in and not see them heading in a direction that I feel they should be going in, and what's important for them is very different to what's going on in my mind, but giving them an opportunity to be here, and giving them the opportunity to find what's meaningful for them in their recovery, they'll find their destination just like I did, just by given the opportunity. And I found that to be the most helpful part of me in my personal recovery, and I find that that's kind of where I am now as a worker, that I need to focus on their opportunity rather than the outcome. Know when to take that worker's hat off at the end of each day. Really, for me to go home and to spend the day, if I have a day off work, then to spend the day enjoying my life, you know, and really living my life the way I've wanted to live it, rather than thinking about the client's you know, which sometimes, you know, is unavoidable. But really, I think, you know, being able to leave work at work, what you're seeing on the outside with a lot of ice users are very different to the inside. There's lots of trauma with a lot of clients who come into services like this. And when they're using drugs, you know, they're very different to when they're not using drugs, you know, and some of these young people are really lovely people, you know, and they really have so much to give.